Welcome to Late Boomers. I'm Kathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. We're so glad you're with us today.
One of the things we love about doing this podcast is discovering how creativity doesn't fade with age. It deepens, it evolves.
Absolutely. And today's topic touches every one of us, music. And not just as entertainment, but as science, mathematics, philosophy, and even evolutionary biology.
For instance, why does a minor chord make us feel sad? Why does an octave feel complete? How is it that our brains can hear mathematical symmetry?
Yeah, and these are questions that bridge art and science. It's the kind of questions that our guest has dedicated his career to exploring.
We're thrilled to welcome Kurt Ellenberger, musician, scholar, and interdisciplinary thinker who blends music theory, cognitive science, philosophy, and evolutionary theory to explore how and why music moves us.
Welcome to Late Boomers, Kurt.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm been really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. How does our brain hear mathematical patterns in music, like the geometric symmetry of octaves, and what does that reveal about human evolution?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something I've been thinking about for a long time. Since I was a teenager, I was just really fascinated with the way that music moved me, the way that it grabbed me, the way that it pulled me in as a career, but really as a vocation for me, more or less, because it still moves me the same way. And so I started asking those questions as a teenager, and I wasn't getting answers in high school. So I took physics classes in college, and it started to kind of unfold for me. And when I became a college teacher, I thought I would share that with my students because it's such a fascinating topic. So I would do these exercises where I demonstrated how this works at the beginning of every one of my classes. That was what every class got, and it was always kind of a mind-blowing experience for the students because they just couldn't believe how this actually works. So you mentioned an octave, so I'll play an octave. Here's a C. And here's another C. And here's another C. And another C. And if I play them all together, it sounds like I'm kind of playing 2 or 3 notes that are the same note, just higher versions of each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
But that's weird because they have different frequencies. So they're not the same pitch, but we as humans perceive something about the relationship of those pitches that makes them sound like a higher version of each other. That makes them, and for that reason, we give them the name C, right? We wouldn't call that a different note. So when you look at the piano keyboard, you can see it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and then that pattern just keeps going all the way up. So what is it about those 2 notes that we call it an octave? I mean, even that's weird because they're 2 different frequencies. But there's something very special about the frequencies that we can actually hear and ascertain in our oral faculty. And that's this. So if I play this C, and I play an octave up from it, there's a really peculiar relationship between those 2 notes. And that relationship is as follows. Let's say this first C I'm playing is on a string that's 4 feet long. The second C, to hit the second C, I have to cut that string length in half and make it a 2-foot string length.
Like our vocal
And then to go
cords.
and an octave up, I have to cut it in half again. So it's 1 foot. So what we're seeing in the octaves is really a 1, 2, 1 to 4, 1 to 8, and so on and so on. So what I've just described there is a mathematical sequence called the binary series. So 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. I mean, us late boomers, I gotta get that in here somewhere.
Thank you.
We'll remember that's what we used to buy in computer memory. It was always linked to the binary series, right? Remember 128 megabytes,
Right.
256 megabytes, and so on. So that numerical series is the foundation of the computers that we are using to converse with right now. So it's found there. I mean, without the binary series, we wouldn't have computers. But it's also found here in music in when we look at the octaves, because those pitches are in a 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 relationship. And that not only corresponds to the string length needed, but it also corresponds to the actual waves. So if that first C is a wave of 4 feet, then the one above it is a 2-foot wave. And that fits perfectly into the 4-foot because it cuts it in half. And that relationship of the twos is something that we just innately are really good at performing, hearing, and seeing. So, for example, if I asked you to fold a piece of paper in half, you could say, "Oh yeah, I can fold an 8.5 by 11 in half, no problem." But if I asked you to fold it into 13 equal pieces, now we got problems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't do that without a ruler,
Yeah.
but you
Right,
could do
right.
4.
Yeah,
Are you
you could do 4.
describing proportional relationships? Is that what you're
Yes,
describing? So,
yes,
how
because
how does that connect to our broader preference for symmetry in both music,
so
nature, and art?
yeah, so what happens is that the brain has a preference for simple relationships. It doesn't like those
Mhm.
complex waveform relationships. So when it hears those two C's, it understands that they are entirely symmetrical. The one fits into the other one by cutting it directly in half, and the one above it cuts it into 4. And when you map those out on top of each other, the symmetry doesn't go away no matter how high you go into the C's.
Mhm.
But if you take let's say how about 17? What if I map a 17 over an 8? Here it is.
It's it sounds like
Mhm.
people tuning up at an orchestra.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
a horror
crowd
movie,
tuning.
right? He's
Horror
upstairs.
movie,
Don't go
sure.
into the bed. No, don't open the closet. Right?
Don't look
It
underneath.
has that's right. So
Yeah.
what you're hearing there is your brain. The reason we're hearing that as dissonance is because the brain is hearing this asymmetrical, irregular, chaotic relationship between those two waveforms, and that causes tension in us. So, and we call that dissonance. But in reality, those are just two different pitches who have a different waveform relationship than the consonants of the two C's. So that's really
Mhm.
what lies at the heart of it. Your brain does that calculation when it's hearing music, and it's saying, is this symmetrical? And if it's not, it actually has another faculty that is really fascinating. This is what I looked at from an evolutionary perspective. It actually has the capacity to fill in the closest symmetrical, quote unquote, solution to the mathematical problem.
Mhm.
So,
Such
So
as
that's like, and it's so universal that that relates back to human evolution, because everyone feels it the same way and hears it the same way, pretty much, right?
yes, it's not a cultural thing. You'd think, well, I learned how to do this. That's not really what
Uh-huh.
it is. Can you two sing, or are there any singers back there?
I
we
used to
both
sing a
sing.
lot. We both sing, but I don't sing anymore. But I sang a
Okay.
lot for
Well,
years and years and years, many, many things.
okay.
And I
Choirs
So,
and
still sing.
harmonies and all that stuff.
oh, cool. Okay. So, well, if you don't feel like singing, you don't have to. You can just tell me
I'm not going
what
to.
note you think comes next. So I'll just play this little sequence here. It's just 10 seconds, and then I'll say, what note do you think should come next? So here we go.
Oh,
Bob.
um,
No, I was going down.
There it is,
neither
right?
one of us.
I went down. I just
You were
didn't hit
pretty
it right.
close.
Yeah, I
You're
didn't
pretty
hit it.
close. So the weird thing is I didn't play that note.
No,
So somehow you
it's
pulled or
resolving.
heard
We fill it
you,
in.
you fill it in. Why? Because what I played ended up with a 9 and 11 against 8. And what's the closest factor of 2? Well, the 9 goes to the 8 and the 11 goes to the 10. So your brain fills that in. And that's no small feat, because if we didn't have that, faculty, we wouldn't have music. I mean, it's the engine that makes it run, because if you're expecting a certain note, then the composer can give it to you or give you something completely different. And in so doing, creates a narrative in sound. Without that, there would be no reason for you to expect the tune to end, or you couldn't be surprised by the tune going in a slightly different direction. So it's really a curious faculty, because from an evolutionary viewpoint, you would need to either that skill would need to either help you procreate more, or to allocate more resources. And it's not entirely clear. It's not clear to me at all how the ability to predict that note could save you from a tiger, or could get you more food, or would allow you to procreate more.
Yeah,
Right.
that's so fascinating. Well, is that how you would describe its effect on nature? How it affects nature, and even, well, art, painting, that you can see, because art is often dissonant, but nature, what would the progression be with that?
Well, I think what we see in nature too is that same symmetry. When a tree grows, the leaves are all kind of the same. They're going out around the tree in the same way, and we find those things beautiful. Or we look at a sunset that chops our vision right in half. The sun is going down, above is the sky, and then below is the ground or the sea. We enjoy those things that are ordered and symmetrical like that. But it's not just humans who do that. They've done studies with birds and with other animals, where they will have a dissonant sound playing at a nesting spot and a nice consonant sound playing at a nesting spot, and the birds will avoid the spot with the dissonant sound and go to the spot with the consonant sound. So it seems like there is kind of an appreciation, or a search for symmetry and order that's kind of built into us at a really deep level.
Oh, yes, and birds, of course, sing all the time. They're singing
Mm-hmm.
their entire waking time is singing. Well,
Yep, exactly.
how has your interdisciplinary approach, blending music with science and philosophy, shaped your teaching, especially in exploring tonality's narrative power?
Yeah, so I taught in the Frederick Meyer Honors College at Grand Valley State University here in West Michigan for about 16, 17 years. And I moved over there from the music department because I really wanted to teach more interdisciplinary stuff. I enjoy doing lessons and everything, but I've always been someone that explored those other areas. And I enjoy the challenge of bringing those topics to people who are not professional musicians, or who don't have a lot of disciplinary knowledge. So that's what I spent my career doing, and that's what I started doing in terms of my writing and my outreach, and even what I'm doing now when I do podcasts. Is I'm trying to bring some of that information in a way that is easy to digest for an average listener, but also kind of opens the lid on it and shows how miraculous this thing that we take for granted, which we call music, really is in our lives. So it's really been right at the center of what I've done my entire career.
Oh, wow.
That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
I love that you've been able to do that. And obviously, you basically started as a musician then, right?
Yeah, I started. I've come from a very musical family. We did singing by the time we were 2 or 3. My sister and I would just be singing folk songs and canons and rounds and whatnot with my father, who was a real choir guy who spent a lot of time singing and was really into it. And then I started on the instruments. And then by the time I got to be a teenager, I just got hooked. and I knew this was what I wanted to do. And I started practicing 3, 4 hours a day. And by the time I was 16 or 17, I was working professionally in the Detroit area. And that was it for me. I just wanted to do music, and that's what I focused on.
You didn't want to be a
Wonderful.
rock star.
Ha! Well, I wouldn't have complained if that came along, but no, I was always interested in more of the classical music and jazz music, although I love pop music too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What did you grow up with on the pop
Pop
music
music wise,
scene? Hmm.
oh geez, I came up in the '70s, so Elton John, Pink Floyd,
Mm.
Genesis, all of those great classic rock bands. That was really what I came up with. But I always gravitated more towards the progressive rock stuff, so Genesis, King Crimson, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I always liked the just kind of the top
Yeah,
40 that was being played at that time, which is, I don't know, it seems to be somewhat timeless because all of my students every year, that's what they're listening to. I'm thinking, man, why are you listening to the music that I grew up with in the '70s?
Yeah. Hmm.
because it's
Kind of
way
funny.
more melodic than what is happening now.
Yeah,
I can People
I don't
grab
want to
onto
sound
those
like a,
melodies. Yeah, it is though. It's
yeah,
just
I mean, I don't want to sound like the angry old man on the porch, but
yeah. I don't
is it,
either, but
it's,
it's let's face it, that music is more melodic, more chord structure, more harmonies than what we have
yeah,
now.
Yeah, but then you
yeah,
get
Yeah.
to
and
classical and jazz. I still listen to all the old songs on the pop charts, but I love jazz and classical now, although the dissonance in progressive jazz is a little jarring for me. Um, but
hmm
but
And
I'm I, and
if you were like me, raised by a father who sang in choirs and stuff, which I came up with that. Also, my father sang in church choir, and then I joined church
yeah,
choirs and sang in church choirs for years. So you were
hmm
probably exposed to all that too, right?
absolutely. Yeah, it was just part of what our family did. That was it.
Right, right.
and I
That's right.
sang madrigals a lot in school, and we had a lot of minor chords in madrigals, and I was always wondering why the minor chords, and I know that you have a thought on that because it evokes kind of a sadness, kind of a different mood, and why do you think that is? And how do composers use that knowledge to enhance their storytelling, and especially in jazz and classical, but also rock and roll?
Yeah, it works the same in any genre, right? Usually those minor key songs are going to evoke feelings of sadness, depending on the tempo, right? If you have a minor key song that's really fast, you're not going to feel that sadness. You're going to feel it in the slower tempos more so. But it works the same in pretty much in every genre. So there's a couple things there. One is the tempo and the gestures in the music. So in the minor key music, it's usually a slower tempo, maybe 60 beats per minute, 70 beats per minute, which is roughly where our heartbeat is. So
Mm.
the
Oh,
pop music that makes us that we put on when we work out or we're going to a party, that's at 120, 125, 130 beats per minute. So humans react to those rhythms and the sounds in a mimetic way, meaning that we mimic them. So that's why you get pumped up when something is at a fast tempo, is because your heart rate and your body is reacting to the rhythmic gestures in the music that are twice as fast as your natural rhythm. But when you go to maybe a funeral or some other event where it's more somber, the music is going to be slow, probably a little minor keyish, and that tells your body, hey, don't get excited here. We're going at about 60 beats per minute. Everything's calm, quiet, respectful. Don't call attention to yourself, etc. So we mimic those characters that we find in the music, which is
mm.
why ever since the Greeks, philosophers and even governments have been worried about what kind of music people listen to, because they realize that the music changes how you react to things.
That's very interesting because I'm a writer, and you can write that way too, where you want to speed up the tempo. or you want the to raise the heartbeat of the reader, and then you can
Mhm.
slow it down. It's fascinating to have you say that because I never really thought of it that way.
Yeah, with the
Well,
heartbeat.
yeah, and I don't think a lot of creative people are they're not doing that intentionally. They just know that this is, hey, if I want to create this effect in writing or in music, I can do it by using tempo because the slower tempo makes me feel a certain way. Or even in punctuation in writing, I find sometimes when they break the rules of punctuation and make me stop, it has that sort of whoa Nelly effect, and it changes the way I'm reading the actual text. So it works there very in much the same way.
And yeah, and if any of our listeners have had the opportunity ever to watch a movie that they might know what it is without the music on it, you can't even relate to the movie at all. You
Yeah.
don't even get it. You it won't scare you one bit if it's scary. I mean, it's just completely amazing what the music film composers are so brilliant with that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're manipulating the expectations that I described earlier, that you're expecting a certain sound and they're not giving it to you. And what that does the anxiety in you increases. You're saying I want to have the C, but they're not giving you the C, and they stretch that out for miles and miles and miles, and the next thing you know, you're just gripped by what's on the screen because it's painting the tension that's on the screen.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
One of my favorite things in the world is to go to a scoring session and watch the orchestra put the music onto the film. It's just magic.
Hmm.
I want to ask you, since you've done a lot of teaching, what's the most memorable aha moment you've witnessed from a student?
Well, I have to say it's that exercise that I did at the beginning of each class because it was the entire class. I would play the example that I played for you, and then I'd ask them to sing the note, and they all sang this same note. And I said, "So, well, let me get this straight here. I played some sound, it went into your ears, your ear converted the analog signal into an electrical signal that got sent to your brain, and your brain instantly calculated the symmetry between the sound waves and then sent the signal to your vocal cords to go to this note to get rid of the asymmetry." And in
Mm.
every class they just look at me like, first they look over at each other and go, what did he just say? And then they just can't believe it. And then they would usually come back to the next class and say, I tried explaining this to my the people in my dorm, and people thought I was crazy, stuff like that. So that's just been a ton of fun for me.
That gives me goosebumps because it's
Yeah.
so primitive. It's so whatever the word is, evolutionatory or evolutionary. Um,
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
but if I mean, basically, is that your test to test music's evolutionary origins, and or are there others? And if you could design another, what would it be, and what would it focus on?
Well, I so what I did was I started asking. I have some friends who are evolutionary biologists, and I said, "So where do we get this from? Well, why are we able to predict the sound based on the asymmetry of one, and then we fill in the closest symmetrical underneath that? So the 11 goes to a 10, right? So the 11 goes to a 10. That's the amen in every hymn,
Hmm.
right? And you're
I
yearning.
harmonize
Yeah,
with it.
that was great. And you're
But
yearning for the 10, right?
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
yearning
Yeah.
for it, and when you don't give it, it's like, ugh. So
Yeah.
it's all very interesting to me. So it's Darwinian in a way, but you think Darwin's theories and his falls short. Please explain that.
Yeah. So I did a pretty extensive survey of the evolutionary research on music. I spent about 18 months doing it. I don't know how many articles I read. And the further I got in, the more I realized they just really don't have an answer for this. First of all, they don't really know it. Like most of them don't know that that's how it works, which kind of makes sense. It's out of your discipline. But they They have theories of, well, it provides social cohesion, which is probably true. It was a way for, it helps children learn, which is probably, well, we know that's all true. But to come down and say, well, someone was born with the ability to predict the next note, and then that had to give them and their progeny some kind of skill that would have increased their ability to, again, procreate and allocate resources. And I just didn't find anything that even dealt with the issue. It was all very vague, kind of social cohesion, singing to babies kind of stuff. There was nothing there. So I just don't think
Yeah.
they've answered that at all.
Yeah, just we haven't really quite figured it out on an intelligent level. We just know it emotionally without being able to
Right.
write it down, right? So
Yeah, I mean, we
then
react to
that
it like
leads
that
me
for
to,
sure.
so what role does genetics play in musicality? Like lineages like the Bach family. Um, is there research being done to map musical traits to inherited predispositions?
Well, they've looked at a lot of the families of musicians, and it doesn't seem
Mhm.
to be a genetic thing. It seems to be sort of possibly a hearing gift, like an auditory. You're just really gifted in the terms of the way that you hear, or the way that your nervous system is built, something like that. But the Bach family, there were musicians that kept going on after Bach until the 1800s. But it's also, they were trained, from a very early age, so they're
Mhm.
brought into the musical language. So it's kind of hard to separate that out, because it's pretty rare that you have someone who, let's say, there's no music in the house, and that's it. There's no lessons, no nothing, and then the kid just walks over to a piano and starts playing Mozart. I mean, that you
Mm,
need to have some of that.
yeah.
You need to be hearing it. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but
Well,
it
but
doesn't seem to
anybody
follow
born,
in.
yeah, anybody born into a musical family is going to be introduced to music on day one.
Yes, yes.
Our
So it's
one.
hard.
Our one.
It's hard to separate that out, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the lessons are going to follow and the things. And even if there aren't any piano lessons, somebody is always singing, somebody is introducing it. I know,
Or the
impossible to say I mean, is that genetics or is that, what do you call it? Environmental.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of the two. I mean, what I noticed with my students is I would have some students come in and they would practice a half hour a week, and they would get a little bit better and a little bit better over time. But then I had other students who came in, and all of a sudden they come back the next week, and they've gone way past where I asked them to go. And and the other students who were just practicing a half hour a week couldn't do that. So there is a talent thing there, much like you would see in sports, right? You
Mm.
see
Oh, yeah.
a teenager on the football team, and he's just got a great arm. Well, where did that arm come from? I don't know, but he's got it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we're just gifted in different ways, and
Hmm.
if the student, or if the young person is exposed to music and responds to it and has a gift like that, then they go from, wow, just playing a couple of notes, to all of a sudden they're playing Beethoven sonatas.
Hmm.
That is genius. So Kurt, looking ahead, what's the next big question in music scholarship that excites you most?
Um, I'm still exploring I like to find the cracks between kind of what's popular and what's going on in the discipline. So I like to look at those areas. For me, that's really exciting to see how different genres kind of mingle with each other, and without people in them actually even knowing that they're being that they're being mingled.
Hmm.
Oh,
Do
well,
you have an
that's an
example?
Yeah. So, like for example, in this came from a question that a student asked me, actually, or asked me over the years. I got the same question: why is Christmas music so jazzy? And so I would give a little explanation, and But I hadn't really thought deeply about it, but I thought this is a really interesting question because yeah, a lot of Christmas music has a lot of jazz flavor to it, right? It's not progressive jazz but it has that Ella Fitzgerald 60s Frank Sinatra, kind of vibe to it. And so I thought, well, what is it really about it? So I thought, well, I'm going to research it. I'm going to write an article about it. And what I found out was that during the time that kind of our secular Christmas music was coming to the fore, so in the late 30s, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or Santa Claus is Coming to Town, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, all of that stuff, and then the films that they made from it, they were all of that stuff was being written by Broadway composers. So these composers were bringing the Broadway aesthetic into those songs and into the films as well. Well, what did jazz musicians use? Well, they used the Broadway songbook extensively at the same period of time. So a lot of the tunes that, in other words, the Broadway songbook was the basis for so much of popular jazz in the 40s and 50s and 60s, but it was also the basis for those secular Christmas songs. So they have the same harmony. And so the Christmas songs lend themselves to kind of jazzy versions of them very well because they both have the same grandfather, right?
I
They
never
have the
thought of
Broadway
it that
songbook.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's
those
very
kind of
good point.
I enjoy doing those kind of deep dives and
And we have
figuring out why.
tons, and we also have tons of Christmas music that was written by Jewish composers, like
That's right.
lots
Yes.
of them, like
Lots of
almost
them.
all of
Yes.
them.
Irving Berlin,
White
Mel,
Irving,
Christmas,
Mel
all,
Torme, chestnuts
y-
roasting,
yeah,
yep,
a lot
yep,
of them.
who was
Yeah.
a jazz
yeah.
singer, basically.
Oh yeah. And they were so a lot of those composers were they cut their teeth in the Tin
hmm
Pan Alley era and in
hmm
the 20s, right? A lot of them were Eastern European immigrants of Jewish descent, and they were also well versed in Schumann, Schubert, Beethoven, Brahms, and they brought a lot of that rich harmony into the popular music of the day. That's why it's so good for jazz musicians because it has rich harmony in it that jazz musicians can use to improvise with.
Yeah, so you can have four saxophones in one piece. I love it.
Hmm.
So, so how do you stay inspired, balancing this analysis you do with, say, the emotional spark that you get from performance?
Well, you'd think that maybe diving into it from a acoustical perspective and a scientific perspective would take away from it, but it really doesn't. For me, it just makes it all the more miraculous that we have this because you look under the hood and you see this churning, math and science going on, but the result of it is emotional, it's spiritual, it's deep, but it has that as its engine. And to me, that's just endlessly fascinating.
I think
It's
you just
great.
answered the question I wanted to ask you for our listeners who aren't musicians. How can the understanding of science, the science behind music, deepen their listening experience?
Yeah, I think once you realize that your brain is doing this automatic mathematical calculation and it's doing it instantaneously, and your response to that is this well of emotion. It makes you happy, it makes you sad, it makes you melancholic, it makes you anxious. All of those different shades of emotion are just governed by how a composer is using those mathematical relationships in really finessed and sophisticated ways to garner that response from you. I think to me, when you realize that that's what's going on, it's not a demystification of it. It gets even more mysterious, right? Why do we have that? But I'm not complaining. I'm glad we have it. But to me, it makes it even more miraculous and more mysterious to know that that's what's churning in the background in our brains that makes it happen automatically.
Hmm.
Yeah, I get
Good
that.
point.
And
Yeah.
on our Late Boomers podcast, we're always talking about reinvention, never too late to start something new. And so for our late boomers that are rediscovering piano lessons or joining choirs, what would you say about the lifelong relationship between the brain, our brains, and the music?
Well, there have been studies done. So if any of your listeners are thinking, "Wow, I'm too old to learn piano," you're not. There have been studies done where they've looked at groups of people in their 70s who have not played piano before, and they start playing piano, and their IQ goes up by about 10 points.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
So
gosh.
I
for
think I should start
Yep.
again.
So for
I need to
cognitive
recommence.
yeah.
I
And
gave
what
it
it's
up.
what it's tied to is when you have both hands doing things independently, what's happening in your brain is that there are connections growing between the hemispheres. And that is very healthy cognitively because you use those pathways when you're problem solving. So that's why it's really great for little kids to be playing an instrument like that, because it helps with their brain development. But the cool thing is it doesn't stop when you're 12 or 15. If you do that when you're in your 70s, you can actually increase your cognitive skills by, like I said, I think if I remember that study correctly, it was about 10 points between the group that wasn't playing piano every day.
Wow.
That is an amazing point. I'm in a way still processing it.
I need to get my piano tuned right away.
Me too. But I was actually, while you were saying that, I was trying to think, gee, how I'm so terrible with my left hand on the piano, but the right hand is okay. And I think
Mhm.
part of that, now that you say that, it's like, maybe I've got to get my brain back together here. But
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, this has been beyond enlightening and fascinating for me personally. I know our late boomers audience, both the listeners and the viewers on YouTube, have a whole new way to think about the sounds that we love or that maybe we should listen to, and think about what we are listening to. Most of us
Mhm.
don't think about it. We just listen and enjoy and let our brains and our emotions take over. So thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, from
Well,
a
thank you for having me. It's been great.
pleasure. From evolution to emotion to symmetry, it's remarkable how deeply music is woven into who we are.
Absolutely, totally woven. Time to get the piano lessons out again and to weave them more. But
Yeah,
Kurt,
and
thank you for joining us. And for those of you in our audience who would like to contact Kurt, you can reach him on his website, kurtellenberger.com. And would you like to spell that for everyone, Kurt? And also
Sure, it's all
talk about
all
anything
E's.
that we didn't cover.
Sure, it's all E's, ELLENBERGER.com. So
And
with a
Kurt
K,
with a
Kurt
K.
Kurt
Yep.
with a K. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And thank you, all of you, for listening to Late Boomers.
And please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and to Late Boomers on YouTube.
Share this episode with the music lovers in your life, please.
Please. And we'll see you next time. We're looking forward to it because life does not slow down after 50.
Nope, it gets bolder.